If you have those thoughts of, I'm not creative, or I'm not an artist, or I tried to meditate once and I couldn't clear out my thoughts, I would say mindful art is something especially worth giving a try.
If somebody says, okay, I've actually got 15 minutes right now before I need to whatever it is, and I'm going to actually give this thing a try, what would be something that you would say, hey, try this on for size for the next 15 minutes and without judgment, and then let it go? What would that guidance be?
Yeah, so I have 3 ideas that you could all do within 15 minutes.
Great.
I feel like we're all creative in our own way. And maybe for you listening right now, you like to garden, or you like to cook, or you just like to solve math problems. There's lots of ways we can be creative.
Hello and welcome everybody to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast. My name's Michelle Dutro, and I am joined by, quite frankly, one of the sweetest people I have been around in a long time. I can't wait for you to meet her. I hope you are watching this on YouTube, because her energy, I think, is going to come across even better if you could actually see her in person. But no kidding. You know, you run across people and you think, you are absolutely in the right career field. That is this gal. So I know. Let's get started. Here we go. My guest today is Cynthia Hauk, the founder of Mindful Creative Muse, where she helps people use art and mindfulness as powerful tools for self-care, creativity, and personal growth. Cynthia is a certified teacher, artist, and internationally recognized workshop facilitator whose work has reached thousands of students around the globe through her online courses, retreats, and trainings. What makes Cynthia's approach so unique is how she blends mindfulness practices with simple, accessible art activities, helping people quiet their inner critic, release self-doubt, and reconnect with their creativity. Things we could all use, to include me. Her work is not about creating perfect art, but about creating space for presence, healing, and authentic expression. Stuff that we're going to talk about more in depth. In fact, I'm going to start there. Cynthia has been featured in platforms like Spirituality and Health, and her programs are used by therapists, teachers, and creative entrepreneurs alike. Whether you're a seasoned artist or someone who hasn't picked up a paintbrush since childhood, Cynthia believes mindful art can help you manage stress, tap into flow, and cultivate greater self-compassion. Today, we'll talk about creativity, mindfulness, and the unexpected ways art can transform how we see ourselves and the world around us. Cynthia, did I leave anything out that we need to know about you before we get started?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Oh my goodness, you're so sweet. Okay, so here's where I really want to start, because I've been thinking about this podcast. We've had this book for a few weeks. To me, when I hear the word art, it has, not just within me, I think this is fair to say this is a common response. It has the same reaction as meditation does. People instantly, oh no, that's not for me. I can't do that, right? Either I can't quiet my mind, or I'm not artistic. That's not, you know what I mean? I wasn't born with that gene. And so right away, we are talking mindfulness, which people equate to some kind of meditation. And now we're talking art. And so already, do not click off of this podcast. Already, I do not want someone to go, shoop, swipe, this is not meant for me. I'm neither of those things. So let's just first address that for the person saying, geez, I just wasn't born with that, Cynthia, so I don't think this is for me.
I'm happy you named it, because I do hear that from students a lot. And I, in the past, have also felt that at times. And I'll say, if you have those thoughts of, I'm not creative, or I'm not an artist, or I tried to meditate once and I couldn't clear out my thoughts, I would say mindful art is something especially worth giving a try. So there's a difference with this type of approach. And so with mindful art, if anyone has tried to meditate, I think there's some myths around meditation. Meditation is not clearing out our mind or thoughts. Instead, especially with a mindfulness focus, we're really just trying to be present with ourselves in a way that's kind. We're just trying to not beat ourselves up when we have those thoughts where we get distracted and we think about our grocery list, or, oh, I'm so upset I said that thing yesterday. So it's really a practice in just being kinder to ourselves. And I've found a lot of students and people I've worked with who've tried to meditate and have really struggled with it, that meditating or practicing mindfulness through really simple doodling art activities is like a gateway it makes it much easier. It taps into that part of ourselves, like the younger part of us when we're 6 or 7, and we don't need to do anything right or wrong. We just have a crayon and we're just enjoying ourselves. There's permission for us to explore. And so I say that also because I hear people say, I'm not an artist or I'm not creative. I feel like we're all creative in our own way. And maybe for you listening right now, you like to garden or you like to cook or you just like to solve math problems. There's lots of ways we can be creative. And a lot of people do enjoy the idea of maybe drawing or doodling or painting, but we have this harsh inner critic that says, I don't know what I'm doing. It's not going to be good. I'm not skilled. And so when those thoughts come up, that's actually part of the practice when we do mindful art. It's less about making the art and it's less about meditating. And it's more about how can we be kinder to ourselves and how can we do it in a way that feels a little playful or curious, that can light us up for our own self-care. So there's lots more I can say about that. But if any of those thoughts come up, it's really common. Yeah.
So, I think everybody saw show up on the scene a while ago, these adult coloring books.
Mm.
And so I know a lot of people thought, what in the world is this for? So is this something that you would say in alignment with, hey, this isn't meant to be the next Van Gogh? No one's saying create art that you can somehow sell on eBay, right? That the means to the end. So if the means is some form of artistic outlet, what is that end? If it's not, no one's going to buy this. Yeah, that was not the end we were after. So what would the end be that somebody would say, hey, I'm going to sit down for half an hour and do whatever, whichever version it is? It
It's
would have been a good use of their time if what was the outcome?
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach to creativity and art making. So instead of having the focus be, I need to make a masterpiece, I'm going to
Yep.
create something to hang on my wall, to gift to somebody, to sell somewhere, to present. It's less about presentation and it's actually more of a mirror reflection turning inwards. And so the focus is more on the process. It's on our experience as we're actually creating. And so the doodling books or coloring books that you mentioned, my mom used to actually do paint by numbers when I was younger, and she loved them. And she would just kind of get in a nice chill zone and do paint by numbers. And she doesn't do any other type of art. She never has, and likely that's not her interest. She likes to garden. And what I love about that as an example, or the same thing with mindful art or doodling, there's different ways in, is that the intention is you're not creating a paint by number or a coloring book page to sell somewhere. Maybe people do that as well, but instead it's just a way you can nourish yourself. We are so overwhelmed in the world. We're so stressed and busy and short on time. And this is another way that we can practice self-care, the same way that you brush your teeth in the morning, that maybe you do a 20-minute walk, the way that you do a stretch or yoga session. It's just another way that you can support your own self-care. So it's really about what's happening inside of us as we're creating, less about what we end up visually creating on the outside.
So I know that you've also said that mindfulness art is also a way to get rid of or release or transcend, whatever the word is, blocks. So if we're looking at creative blocks, and there's a few that come to mind, I know artists have them. Writers who are singer-songwriters have creative blocks. I'm a writer, so everybody's heard the term writer block. I know also it can be you have a presentation, you have to give a speech, whatever it is, and you're just banging your head against a wall saying, the idea, the creative, it's just not coming to me. So how could this be useful, and why do you think it is helpful in opening up any kind of blocks that may be, getting in your way, if you will?
I found it to be really helpful for me and for a lot of my students. And I think the reason why is because it removes pressure. So I know if I'm feeling really stuck or blocked around something, it's also typically because I have really high expectations, or I'm worried about doing it right or wrong, or I'm worried about how it's going to be perceived, or I'm trying to get it in a particular way, or I have way too many ideas and I'm overwhelmed. There's all these reasons of why I can get blocked. And it's almost like a pressure valve, it makes me think of like a balloon. You're just letting out a little bit of air. And so, because the focus with mindful art really is on nurturing ourselves, self care, being kind to ourselves, focusing on our experience, and less about the final product, we're taking away that mentality of needing to do it right or wrong, submitting it for a grade, having it be judged and approved by other people. And it's actually almost like building a muscle of I'm doing something for myself where I'm giving myself permission to express myself without pressure. And I say this all the time in my classes that how we create on the page is also how we then show up out in the world. Because the more I can practice when I'm doing mindful art, being kind to myself, giving myself permission to follow my impulses, to express myself, to not have to do something perfectly, to be willing to just take the next step and follow those breadcrumbs, the more I'm likely to also do that out in the world in my life, because you're building that muscle.
So somebody that is dealing with perfectionism across the board, you're seeing that this is a helpful tool in kind of reducing that in all areas that they are very not only self-critical but critical of others. Like, are you seeing this translate in everyday life in other ways that we might be a bit unexpected?
I've found for myself, so I'm definitely a recovering type A personality. My whole life, I've been very much doing everything in school, the youngest manager at my corporate job in my 20s, taking on all the responsibility, doing all the things, right? That was definitely my MO for a long time. And with that came a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of self-imposed perfectionism around it. And I've explored lots of different things. I think people have to find what works for them. I found for me this combination of just softening and being more willing to notice what's happening right now in this moment with my breath, with thoughts that are coming in that maybe are a little bit harsh. How can I soften and be kinder to myself and still take small steps forward? I've found that process through mindful art hugely transformational for me and for a lot of the people that I've worked with. And I would maybe just say, if people are curious, to give it a try, the same way that I say, if you go to a buffet and you're like, oh, that looks interesting, that looks yummy, I'm going to try that. To just taste it, try it on, and see how it feels for you. But I feel like so often when we do one thing in our lives, it does kind of bleed out into other areas in our lives, because it's not about the thing we're doing, it's about how we're showing up in the practice or in the process of doing that thing or experience.
It's funny. This is just coming to mind as you're talking. I didn't think about it before this conversation, but I've heard a couple of people that I know say to me, it's interesting that it dawned on me that I was doing yoga as one more thing to get done during the day.
Mm.
And it clicked that the practice in and of itself and what it was designed and meant to be, I was just treating it like another box to check. And so I think that's everything that you're saying, right? Is what is it to be in the moment and present and going through whatever this experience is, not just to rush through, get to the side, and then on to the next task, which is it's a brain pattern of, I'm very task oriented and here's my things to do during the day, instead of thinking, what's the point of this thing? Why am I doing it and how am I showing up for it? So yeah, to be in a yoga class and looking at your watch is, you kind of miss the point. I want to flip this coin over to, I know there's folks out there that are thinking a very different thought, which is the reason that I stay away from things like this or meditation or anything that wants to kind of quiet the mind is for the things that come in that are highly uncomfortable. So whether that's some form of trauma, some kind of negative emotion, there are things that when the mind gets quiet, things rise up. And so it is a lot of the reason why people stay busy very intentionally, right? Is that whole avoidance of what is sitting in Pandora's box. So how do you handle or how do you address the person that says, yeah, I'm not too interested in slowing down, for this exact reason that I'd rather not have a quiet mind and see what's sitting there on the other side of that door?
Yeah, I have a few things to say about that. So I think that there can sometimes be this myth around mindfulness meditation or even with mindful art that part of the practice of doing it is to quiet the mind or slow down. And for me, it's more so about how we're having a container. We're saying this is something that I can step into, maybe only for 5 minutes, because maybe my world is really busy and I feel really stressed and I'm not really sure how much I want to dip my toes in the water. So maybe I'm just going to set a timer for 5 minutes and try one of the practices. And one thing that I notice, especially that's helpful about mindful art activities, is that as the mind starts coming in and tells us different things, or maybe emotions come up, because that's totally normal and human, that will happen at some point. What I love about these practices is that it's really grounded in simple anchor points. So the same way with meditation that people might focus on the breath, with mindful art, we're literally focusing on how softly or firmly am I holding this pen or marker in my hand? What are the sounds I'm hearing on the page as I make this swirl or this doodle? What am I noticing with my breath? I teach some practices that I call breath doodles, where we're syncing up movement with our breath. And so you literally are seeing something outside of yourself of what's happening in your body. And I say that because it helps to just turn that dial down with some of the thoughts and some of the like flooding emotions that can come in, just speaking from my experience, that it can help to just soften that a little bit. And if and when those things really do start to come up, we have these different anchor points. So maybe I'm focusing on the particular color or the shape, or feeling the page under my hand, noticing the temperature of the paper on my hand as I do it. So there's these small little things. And what I notice is that different anchor points work better for different people. And so it's also kind of an experiment of curiosity to notice. And part of that curiosity also takes you away from these other thoughts of past and future and these other overwhelming emotions. But there's lots of different ways into the practice, and different prompts and ways that I help kind of guide when people are going through the practice, especially when you're first beginning.
So you just referenced about your personal experience as you're doing mindfulness art. Curiosity, what got you into this? And was it something going on in your life that you thought, wow, this is, I don't know how it was introduced to you or if this helped you through something difficult, but I'm curious as to what this is for you and how this showed up in your life and how it made a difference.
Yeah, it's a deeply personal practice for me. I've found this work kind of from two different paths. I've always created art. I deepened my art practice when I struggled with anxiety in my early 20s. I went through cancer treatment in my late 20s. And again, I found a different art practice that was largely about journaling with the images. So I was really able to process a lot that I didn't have words for when I was going through that treatment. And then I also separately had a yoga and meditation practice. And for a long time, they kind of ran parallel, but they never synced up. And then I realized later that as I created art, that I would naturally drop into this like flow state, or a place where I felt like I was being more present. I used to, when I made art years ago, I would be very critical as I was making art. And then once I started to combine the two, this mindfulness with the art, I realized, oh, actually, this can completely create a new experience of how I'm creating. So for me, I definitely have come back to these practices again and again through my own struggles, and deepened and had my own transformations and healings. And then that really sparked me many years ago that I felt called to teach and share with others. And then I'm not exaggerating, got like 20 different certifications and did my master's program. And then now, years later, I think it's like a 15-plus-year journey from when I started teaching. Now I train others of how to teach. And so I just feel really passionate about this work because I've had such a personal experience with it.
So you talk about a cancer journey, and sadly, I know plenty of people listening, either themselves or they know someone. What was this process like? If you could go back to that time, I mean, imagining if you didn't have this as a tool available to you, right? I could imagine it would have been much harder. But I'm curious for somebody listening right now who is going through some sort of medical challenge and they don't know what to do with the worry and the fear, the grief, the sorrow, whatever it is that they're feeling. How was this in that time beneficial for you? So that might be another reason for them to, really reconsider this as an option or something to add to whatever they're currently doing.
Yeah, I think for me, I was struggling not only with the kind of physical part of it, but also grief and also isolation. So when I started the practice or kind of deepening this practice, it was after I had cancer treatment, surgery, radiation, and then I needed to be kind of sequestered or isolated from friends and family while I was, I always say glowing green with my radiation at the time. And so that was a lot to go through that process, but now suddenly be by myself. So I was really with everything that was happening and I didn't really have words for it. It was kind of a jumbled mess. And I think there's lots of ways we can support ourselves through that. And I always encourage people to find what works for them. For me, part of what I did was at that time I discovered a practice called soul collage from Sina Frost, who was a psychologist at the time, but she made this practice of choosing collage images and then writing in response to the collage images that you chose as a way to have what your internal experience was outside of yourself. And it's actually called externalization. So having something outside of yourself, and I find this to be true with drawing, doodling, painting, writing, there gives a little bit of separation. And it was just enough breathing space for me that I still didn't even I didn't do the full process. I literally was flipping through magazines, choosing images, and then I would reflect on what that might mean to me, or I would journal a little bit. And then I had my own practice where I was feeling into my body, feeling into my breath, and having it combined with the mindfulness, where it just allowed me to peek the door open into feeling what my experience was. And I believe Dr. Peter Levine talks about titration. So if you think about like a hospital bed and they have those bags where it drips IV, it just dripped a little bit, enough that I could be with myself in those moments. And then I would rest and nap and read and do other things.
So give me an example of that. So, like describe a picture and a reflection, because I know for a lot of people, they've never even heard of anything like this. So what does that mean? People think about pictures of magazines on a board and they're thinking, I'm going to create a vision board for what I want next year. This is not that. So give me a very specific example of here's a picture of, and it might conjure up a thought or a feeling of this. What does that look like? So somebody could maybe try this on even today.
Yeah. And actually, it's the opposite of the process you just named, which I think might help to frame that so people can hear it a bit more. So with vision boards, you might be having, next year, I want to make this much money or get this house or have this type of thing happen in my fitness journey. And then you might intentionally go and find pictures that match up with that vision and maybe words as well. And you put that on the board. Instead, this process is almost in reverse. So we don't have anything in mind intentionally ahead of time. I'm not setting an intention. I'm simply being curious about what images I feel both either drawn to or repelled by. And I think that can be a really interesting thing to open up to. And then, so an example, one that's coming to mind that I remember I created when I was facilitating a collage workshop was I had chosen an image and it was like a boat on the water. And there might have been a person in the image. I can't remember that part, but I remember part of it is then speaking from the image. So in that particular process, it's I am the one who. So I don't remember exactly what I said at the time, but it might be I am the one who feels like I'm out in the middle of the ocean by myself. I am the one who is curious about what's beneath all of the waters. I am the one who is feeling supported and held in this boat, right? So there's these, we're not writing directly about I am feeling overwhelmed and sad and grief because of cancer. That's not what I was doing. I was going through like a side door or a side window into my experience. And I think this can be so helpful for people if you have health issues, but also if you're just feeling a bit isolated, if you have overwhelming thoughts. It's just another way that we can be with ourselves and be curious about our experience. And that's why I always find it so helpful to have the mindfulness included, because mindfulness is just really being kind to ourselves. And if you don't have that, then it changes the whole thing.
Right. Agreed. So what you're also saying comes to mind because you're looking at ways, like you said, through a side door of other ways of communicating with yourself. How to kind of become better connected in a safe and sometimes playful, but certainly meaningful way. How can you see that also being helpful in communication with others? Maybe it's a significant other, but I know that communication is key in any relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a coworker, a neighbor, your significant other. So when it comes to communication in this, is there also a bridge to that you've seen, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I always say I translate mindful art as equaling connection. And I usually say that because it's a way I can connect with myself, what's happening with my breath, my body, my thoughts, my emotions. I might be noticing something I would have not noticed at all had I just continued to kind of plow through my day, right? I think we've all had that experience. And then because I'm doing that, it allows me to have more presence and more of this like grounded, compassionate place with myself that then when I show up in the world, whether I'm teaching or I'm with friends or family, I feel like I can show up like a better version of myself where I'm more attuned to what's happening with myself, that I can then also be more present with the other person I'm connecting with. And maybe that's not true. Maybe I also take a break, or, there's lots of other ways we navigate that. But I think it goes back to how we are being with ourselves as we're creating can then it like organically translate in different ways when we're no longer in that practice. And part of that muscle we're building is just noticing what's going on with me right now. And the more we can notice that and be kind to ourselves, I believe that there's no way that wouldn't ripple out to other people and our connections.
Right. Agreed. Totally. Okay. As we are wrapping up here, someone is listening right now. They're at home. So they have, their drawer with scratch paper and pens and paper, maybe crayons if they're lucky. But if somebody says, okay, I've actually got 15 minutes right now before I need to, whatever it is, and I'm going to actually give this thing a try. If someone has 15 minutes right now, what would be something that you would say, hey, try this on for size for the next 15 minutes and without judgment, and then let it go? What would that guidance be?
Yeah, so I have 3 ideas that you could all do within 15 minutes.
Great. Great.
One is very simple. It's kind of my go-to warm-up practice that I share oftentimes in my classes, which is one of the breath doodle practices. But if you just have a pen or a pencil and a sheet of paper, you literally, as you are inhaling, you would move the pen up on the page, and as you exhale, you move the pen down on the page, and it makes kind of this like heart rhythm wave. And you can just simply notice some of the things I mentioned earlier. How strongly or firmly are you holding the pen? What sounds are you hearing? How are you noticing your breath? There can be this interesting thing that starts to happen where we catch ourselves like, am I really tracing my breath on the page, or am I breathing and then making the doodle? And, kind of catching like, which part of the process am I in, which is great because we're just being aware of what's happening. So that's the first thing. The second thing is putting on your favorite song and giving yourself permission to simply make marks and doodles to the song, almost like a visual representation of what you're hearing in the music. Can be a really simple practice of just arriving in the present moment. And really, we're using the sounds as our anchor point, and then the marks as the expression. So that's also a really fun one. You can add colors. And then the other one, which if anybody hasn't ever heard of a body scan meditation, this might be kind of dipping your toes in the water a bit more. But you can also do a simple body scan and then add doodles or colors about what you may be noticing in your body. If that feels like, I don't know what you're talking about, I do have on my YouTube channel a like 15-minute video that will guide you through the whole thing. So Mindful Creative Muse is my name on YouTube, and you can always follow along. But those are all really simple things that can be done with very little supplies and with no experience at all.
Perfect. You walked me right into how I was going to wrap this up. If somebody is listening saying, I could use some more guidance. I could use some more tips. I could use some more Cynthia. Whatever it is that they're saying, I just would like more. How can somebody reach you? Where can they find out more about what you're doing? Whether that's on social media or a website or anything. And if you are listening, don't put that doodling pen down. It'll all be in show notes, so you can just click on it later. So what is the ways that people can find you?
So the easiest thing I usually recommend if people are curious to try out mindful art, I have a free workbook called Mindful Art for Self-Care that you can download. It has a variety of different exercises and prompts and a bit more information about mindful art. So that's a free download that'll be in show notes linked. And then you can always find me at my website, mindfulcreativemuse.com. I have a resources page on there as well that has more videos and podcasts and articles, so you can kind of go down the rabbit hole if you're curious to learn more.
Very cool. And I always wrap this show up, I can't wait for your answer to this, with the same question for everybody. And that is, what is one thing that you absolutely believe to be true?
Mm. Creativity is our birthright, and that looks different for everyone. And creativity can be a bridge to our own connection to self and to others.
I knew it was going to be amazing. That is fantastic. I love that. And you're absolutely right. It is for everybody. And I hope that this time together has maybe nudged somebody a little bit closer to putting down that inner critic and saying, I'll give it a shot and see what difference it can make in my life. So I appreciate your wisdom and your time and being with us here today and your energy. I mean, I'm telling you what, sweetest energy I have been around in such a long time. It is, I hope everybody checks out everything that you do, because everybody could use more of you in their life. I know that. So truly, thank you for all of this. And I know that it will be a help to so many people. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Please hit subscribe so you don't miss more of these amazing conversations. And thank you so much for being here on the Game Changer podcast.
Thank you for having me.